Hi there. Welcome to our webinar on developing a coaching approach to leadership. I'm Tracee Findlater from Spiral, and my co-host here is Angie Bishop of Salient Consultancy.
Hello.
So today we're following up on the webinar that we did in January on leadership skills for recruitment. So we talked about developing those leadership qualities and developing them and demonstrating them in a recruitment context. And we covered quite a few topics within that area that we felt lent themselves to a bit of a deeper dive. So we've decided to run some shorter sessions over the coming months that will go into more detail in these areas. So we're planning to look at things like managing barriers and how to get feedback from colleagues on leadership development. But for today, our starting points on developing the coaching elements of leadership and management.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, today is really and largely for people who are fairly new to the idea of using a coaching approach to management and leadership. But I guess it would also work just as well as a refresher for seasoned leaders.
Mhm.
Um, we're anticipating the session will be around 20 to 30 minutes long. So
Mhm.
it's something of an express session. I can't say it. To cover off the main points we really want to make.
Yeah, lovely. Certainly for Angie and I, our focus in most areas of life is from a coaching perspective, as we are coaches ourselves. But it's becoming increasingly recognised that a coach style isn't just a nice to have in the workplace. It's become a requirement. Angie, is that your experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely, it is. When we talked last time, we talked about how that kind of top-down approach to manage people management is becoming obsolete, and
Mm.
that kind of command and control style of management is now
Mhm.
considered old-fashioned, has been superseded by much more appropriate and better approaches.
Mhm.
So, people want to be treated as equals, don't they? And be able
Yeah.
to collaborate with one another and feel, really included as part of that sort of solution making process. Um, and I guess this move away from instruction to inclusion has really been backed up by surveys, studies from around the world.
Mhm.
If you look at sort of Daniel Goleman's 2000 study in the Harvard Business Review, I think that's still sort of really worth having a quick look at.
Mhm.
Um, and people don't want to be dictated to, do they? They don't want to feel that they're just there to carry out some kind of specific task, like some kind of cog in a machine. Um, they really want to feel part of an inclusive and collaborative process and be part of that team.
Mhm.
And I guess working together for what's best for both the team, the situation, or the tasks that they face.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think that survey that you mentioned made very clear that businesses these days move so fast that what may have worked in the past just doesn't always hold
Mm.
true in the present. So managers and leaders, they can't have all the right answers all the time. My view is that where managers struggle with developing a more inclusive approach is where coaching is put at odds with management, and there's this
Mm.
prevailing
Mm.
misconception that coaching is sort of specifically focused on feelings and means that managers should be personally invested in the lives of their employees. So I think it's crucial that leaders and managers can be confident that developing this coaching mindset and having a coaching focus is not somehow synonymous with accommodating like the whims of the team.
Mm.
The mission of the business should still be the priority, but that this can be maintained while also adopting this coaching focus that we'll talk about.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good point, Tracy. I think it's important to appreciate that there's sometimes that misunderstanding of this, which
Mhm.
which actually can even create a sort of resistance to the word coaching in inverted
Yeah.
commas. And it's good to appreciate that coaching isn't just about making things fluffy and nice, you know.
Mhm.
And there's a massive world of difference between using emotional intelligence and really versus pandering to emotions. And we'll expand on this point shortly.
Definitely. I think defining coaching and a coaching approach can be a little bit tricky. I think, like most quite simple fundamental things, we can make the definition very complex by overthinking it. So I think we don't want deep into the basics of coaching, or we could end up sort of creating more problems than we attempt to solve. But that's why the intention for today is to really look at consciously developing and demonstrating a coaching approach as a manager or a leader. And I think by looking at this specifically, a number of really positive things come to the fore. And when we've been sort of looking back over this, three main points of focus have surfaced on sort of approaching a coaching as a management tool. We've got some slides to best demonstrate that point. So I'll just bring those up now. Just bear with me. Right. So what we've got there is just what we're going to sort of summarize through today. So we're going to look at starting with questions, we're going to look at using interpersonal, and we're going to look at owning the process and sharing it. So if we start with the questioning approach, again, I've got another slide. Hopefully you can see that. So
Yeah.
first and foremost, developing a coaching approach is developing a questioning approach. Coaching is about others to help themselves, and that really starts with offering agency to people rather than instructing them, like you said, Angie, earlier, that command and control thing. You know, it can be overridden by taking this questioning approach that gives agency to people. Now, obviously, this takes time, and it's not just about turning advice into a query, like, you know, have you thought about doing this? You know, that's not what we're talking about here. You know, it's not a game. It's about carving time out to be genuinely curious about what the person you're helping or managing cares about, and then creating the attitudes and behaviors that move away from that command and control approach. So you should see some questions that have come up on the slide there. So questions like those will really probe people's thinking with the ultimate aim of empowering them to get on with their own work. So instead of jumping straight into solution mode and saying, you do this, or let me come and do this for you, you know, start with what's on your mind, and then wait for them to talk it through and probe it with them, you know, checking what's the specific challenge for you, and then drilling down to what you want to happen. So you're not just inferring the action you think you can take, or you know that you think that person should take, but you're genuine in those questions to support that person in addressing the issue at hand themselves.
Okay, so if I can come in with an example at this point, then just to demonstrate that. So say you're my manager, and I'm struggling to get a particular employee to engage with a new part of their role. Traditionally, I would come to you with staff issues, and you help me by perhaps either talking directly to the employee or issuing me with instructions on what I need to do. However, I now want to own my own leadership of that team, but I'm struggling to know how. So, Tracee, how would you manage that conversation with a coaching mindset hat on?
Yeah, I think it's a good example, because I think it's a very kind of everyday example. You know, we've all been in that situation before, haven't we?
Yeah.
I think my very first action, my very first thing, would really be to resist the urge to start with what can I do to help, which is quite natural. I think when someone comes to us, we are like, you know, what do you want? What can I
What
do?
can I do?
But then yeah, but that would put me at the forefront of the action rather than you. So I would be swooping in as a fixer rather than, you know, getting you to help yourself. So I'd start by asking you what was on your mind and what issues you were experiencing, and then probing those issues to really help both of us understand what the real and most fundamental issue is. Is it that there's a problem with the whole team? Is one individual causing you problems? You know, is there a training need for you, or within the team? So ultimately, I'm trying to help you understand what the real challenges with the situation, not the superficial issue, but what getting underneath to really understand what the situation is and what result you're trying to achieve in a way that supports you to understand those things.
Okay, so to summarize, I guess, it's you trying to help me think through what I need to do rather than simply just telling me what to do.
Yeah, that's right. I know it's quite hard to do, particularly if you're a manager who's used to someone else coming in and
Yeah.
troubleshooting. But once you're able to own that process and feel that I've given you the ownership, you know, to manage that process with my support, it means that performance issues can be handled in a much more holistic way.
Do you think there's a risk in that? As someone, I'm asking you for help. Do you think I might sort of feel fobbed off with a kind of questioning approach?
But possibly to start with, if you're not used to that approach, I suppose yes, it is a risk. But that's why it's important for me to ask you those questions in a way that genuinely engages what you're trying to achieve. So I'm not just superficially trying to sort of tick things off that I've asked and made sure I've done my bit. But, I'm really asking those questions genuinely to help you achieve what you need to create your own solutions. I think, as we said, it's about being curious and about authentically helping people to help themselves,
Yeah.
not just adding a question mark to the end of a statement as advice.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly right. I remember a story, just a little anecdote in the news years ago about the I think she was called the Eliza chat box, and this was a chat
Chatbot,
box that was
yeah.
programmed to carry out the functions of a therapist, and all it kind of did really was sort of repeat the information back, and then put a sort of question mark at the end, and also sort of threw in a few instances of, well, how did that make you feel? And
Yeah.
that's not what we're talking about right here.
That's right. No, absolutely we're not. But that is a really good example of poor coaching. So there's a reason why genuine questions are so powerful, because the minute we ask a question of someone else, they become the subject
Mm.
of what's happening and potentially an agent of change. Genuine questioning does create that engagement over instruction that we're talking about, which I think brings us neatly onto the interpersonal skills, because it's difficult to ask good questions, certainly if you're starting out and developing the coaching approach, if you don't employ, good interpersonal skills. So, Angie, I know this is an area of particular interest to you. So, do you want to pick this up?
Yeah, okay, that's brilliant. Thanks, Tracee. Okay, so in our last webinar, we went through a slide on qualities, which I'll just bring up now to refresh everybody.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
brilliant.
up.
Yes,
Yeah.
so I'd really
Hmm.
like to focus on a few of these particular interpersonal skills that I think will help with developing this kind of coaching approach that we're talking about. And specifically, the three E's. Sounds like some kind of chemical, doesn't it? The three E's, and those are the ones that you can see at the top in red,
Yeah.
highlighted in red. So that's emotional intelligence, empathy, and empowerment. And these are three really powerful skills to have. Interpersonal skills really are the qualities that can support a coaching approach to leadership. So it's really about having that mindset, and also the behaviors that encourage characteristics such as collaboration,
Hmm.
inclusion, empowerment, all those
Yeah.
kind of things. And I'd just like to expand a bit more on those three qualities. So let's just put up another slide, if I may.
Yeah, that's up.
Okay, so these are the three that I'm just going to expand on a little bit more. So, emotional intelligence. I mean, what is that? We hear a lot about it, but do we really know what it means? So, it's really about the ability to understand, process, and express one's own feelings, while also recognizing and being able to engage with the feelings of others, as it
Hmm.
says there. It's really about being able to manage impulsive feelings and behaviors in a healthy way, and being responsible for yourself and your own behaviors. So as we said, it's not about accommodating the whims of others, but rather recognizing where your own emotions affect your thoughts and behaviors, and then also encouraging others in that same way, for them to take responsibility for their own behaviors and thoughts.
Yeah, that's a really good summary of emotional intelligence. How do you think this relates to asking those questions that we looked at in the earlier slide?
Well, I think it's about the importance of being genuinely engaged with the conversation.
Mm.
I think you mentioned it earlier. This is the most important thing we can do as humans, to actually stop and then to quietly listen to what the other person is saying. I mean, oddly enough, we're then engaging more by actively listening. So
Mm.
it sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? You
Yeah.
to engage more by stopping talking. But what it does is it gives space to what's being said by the other person.
Mhm.
And you can't just play act giving attention, but you genuinely have to engage with it. I think then you'll be, if you do genuinely engage, you'll be then surprised at how quickly you can then both focus together on something new, such as an idea or concept, and that you're both genuinely curious about. It just brings you
Yeah.
together, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to empathy. So empathy ties in nicely, really nicely here. If I can give a quick sort of summary, psychology today defines empathy as the ability to recognize, understand, and share the thoughts and feelings of another person, as it says on the slide. Recognition is really, really different to feeling. So this definition should help managers who are concerned that emotional intelligence is about showing your emotions. It's not that at
Mhm.
all. It's more about slowing down, listening, and observing, really without making any judgment straight away, or any judgment at all, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, empathy's always been more about the ability to kind of read the room and get the vibe rather than, internalizing everything emotionally.
Yeah, I mean that's a Tracy, that's a really great way of putting it, to be honest. Sort of honing observational skills in order to gauge the mood more intuitively, and then
Yeah.
I guess motivate accordingly, really.
Mhm.
So that brings us nicely on to empowerment, which is the degree of autonomy that an individual holds within a team or community. So, as we said earlier, business moves so fast now that there's a constant need for new ideas, new approaches, and it's really difficult. Those really can't be met, I don't think, by one single person.
No.
Do you remember that old saying that two heads are better than one?
Yeah.
Well, let's push that further. So, let's say 3, 7, or any number of heads will always be better than one, particularly coming from within a very diverse team. Um,
Mm.
and in that kind of team where diversity is treasured and welcomed, you can expect many great ideas to come out to be discussed, and
Mm.
then amazing solutions will naturally follow.
Yeah,
And that sort of collaborative approach to progression works far better than just having one single person's viewpoint. Um, I
absolutely.
think you need a melting pot of diverse ideas, really. Um,
Mhm.
and empowerment really comes, as it says on the slide there, comes from trusting people to take responsibility for themselves, um,
Mhm.
encouraging people to speak up at meetings without fear of judgment, and helping people to gain confidence in their own decision making. Um, and really, the biggest thing really is valuing their contribution.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. So, Angie, do you have an experience yourself of when you, as a leader, had to employ all of these qualities?
Oh, loads. Yeah. I mean, it feels like 100 years ago. But in my first appointment as a finance manager, I fitted into that exact mold of being really very instructive to my team. I
Mm.
guess for me at that time, it was a mix of trying to find my feet as a new manager, but also I thought that's what the expectation was, to be seen managing my staff and the financial month end.
Yeah, so being seen to manage, that's all about, the perception rather than you leading authentically, which does all sound a bit sort of last century, if that's not too rude to say.
Thanks, Tracee. And no, not rude. I agree totally. It is last century. I mean, I remember early on, a team member got very frustrated with me and said, "You don't listen." And I was
Oh.
really shocked about that,
Mhm.
because but actually the most shocking thing was my initial reaction was to think that as a manager, I wasn't supposed to listen. I was there
Yeah.
to issue orders. I mean, how ridiculous is that? Thinking about it now. No wonder she complained at me, honestly. But since then, I've done a complete change around, and mostly listen more than talk. Although you wouldn't believe it, in order to understand what the other person needs from me as a leader. I also recognise that good leadership is about inspiring others to be the best that they can be. And I guess so. My job as a leader is really to encourage, support, and definitely empower others to bring out their potential to do just that.
Yeah, thanks, Angie. That's really honest and really puts it in, into context as well. So we're getting a little bit tight for time now, so I'm just going
Okay.
to bring up the final point, which should tie these elements together. So I've got one more slide I'm going to pop up. Okay. So as it says, owning the process and sharing it, which is really sort of the third part of what we're talking about here. And this is really where the whole concept lives and dies, because you develop a coaching culture in isolation. One of the best examples of a coaching culture I know of is a friend of mine who heads up a team of half a dozen very different individuals. And they've been working together in their current setup for about 3 years now. And it's a really happy, lively team with a collective sense of purpose. But it didn't happen overnight. And I talked to my friend recently to get a few secrets. They shared the following. Firstly, when it came to creating the team, they created for attitude over skills, because in general, most skills can be taught, but attitude is relatively fixed.
Yeah, yeah. Excuse me if I just jump in. I mean, you said yeah, they recruited for attitude over skills, and there's a really great I think it's TED talk on recruiting for attitude. And we can
Yeah,
probably
is that Simon
yeah,
Sinek's
yeah,
TED
it's
talk, I
brilliant,
think, isn't it?
brilliant. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we can perhaps share that in the comments later,
yeah.
maybe. But yeah, I think it's becoming increasingly recognised that it's much more effective in both time and money to teach a skill than it is to managing a poor attitude. So that's the first point. And the second point is that successful team communicates constantly. So they have daily drop-ins over lockdown. They used Zoom every day and just sort of had an open forum so that people could check in at any time. And they have a real transparency about what's going on and a sense of consistently empowering and trusting each other. So it's not just a top-down management, but the whole team supporting and listening to each other.
Mm. Yeah, these elements that really demonstrate the coaching culture, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's just not about the manager asking questions and demonstrating emotional intelligence. The whole team really needs to understand what makes that coaching culture.
hmm Yeah, absolutely, and it works. So, sort of, if there's anything to be taken away from today, it's really just to take those elements and just try and give them a go. If you're not already applying these coaching techniques, then just make a start. Next time you have a conversation with a member, if you can, ask questions rather than giving instructions, and demonstrate those elements of emotional intelligence. So listen and genuinely engage, lead those elements by example, and then get others to try and engage with the process too.
Yeah, as I said earlier, many heads really are better than one. And I think with the coaching approach, you're all pulling in the same direction rather than
Yeah.
kind of responding to what just one person sort of pointing or pushing you in a specific direction.
Yeah, that's right. And it will take time, as I said, that there'll be days when you stumble. Like, Angie and I have certainly sort of stumbled in the past with things when we're trying to get those things right. And there will be days when it feels quicker and easier to just tell people what to do. And sometimes that is appropriate. If someone just asks you for a report, you don't sort of say, well, where do you think the report is? You just hand it to them. But, as we've said, with the pace of business now, leaders and managers, they can't have the right answers all the time. So it's in everyone's interest to raise an inclusive, diverse, and progressive team. And this can genuinely happen when applying these coaching approaches.
Yeah, thanks, Tracey. Absolutely. And I guess on that note, if anyone is interested in learning more, then we'd invite you to have a look at our websites, and if there's anything Salient or Sun Spiral can help you with.
Yeah. I've just put details of our websites
Yeah,
on there, so you should be able to see those
brilliant.
now. As Sun Spiral, I tend to focus on sort of supervisors and new managers, and Angie's focus on senior management and executive. But we'd love to hear from you if you'd like to talk about how we can help further. We both offer things like free initial consultations, and there's no obligations. We'll put our contact details in the comments box after the event so that people can get in touch.
Brilliant. So, as Tracey said, we're going to be at the beginning. We're going to be running some more seminars, more webinars over the coming months, and the next one is going to be on barriers to progression, which I'm again really looking forward to. It'll be a fun
Yeah.
conversation. So please look out for that on LinkedIn. There should be a notification of that.
Yeah.
I guess please also share this link, the link to this chat, and tell your friends how wonderful it was and how interesting and what wonderful points we made. So yeah, that'd be brilliant. I'd appreciate that. And I guess we just look forward to seeing you next time. So bye from
Yeah.
me.
Thanks very much. Bye for now.
Okay, take care.